Look into this mirror, he instructed, and keep your heart steady. I leaned forward hesitantly. At first, I saw only my own reflection. Then the image began to ripple like water. I saw a hand tying a ribbon around a box, then the familiar shape of a bracelet. Slowly, a face I knew very well appeared. My breath caught in my throat. From the time we were little girls, our lives were tied together. We played on the same dusty streets, shared roasted maize under the mango tree, and fetched water from the borehole with small buckets that nearly outweighed us. People in the neighborhood often called us twins, even though we were not related by blood. At school, we were inseparable. We walked together every morning, sat on the same wooden bench, and borrowed each other's pencils and books. When I forgot my lunch, she would give me half of hers. And when she fell sick, I carried her homework to her house and explained the lessons she had missed. During holidays, I spent more time at her home than at mine, and her parents treated me as though I was their daughter. In secondary school, nothing changed. We wore our hair in the same style and even had our uniforms sewn by the same tailor so we could look alike. We studied together under the weak light of a lantern, whispering about the future we both dreamed of. She told me she wanted to be a lawyer, and I told her I wanted to become a successful businesswoman. We laughed and promised each other that no matter where life took us, we would always remain side by side. When university applications came, we sat down together, filled in the forms, and prayed over them. The day the acceptance letters arrived, we screamed and held each other tight. We had both been admitted to the same school. With excitement overflowing, we packed our bags and moved into a hostel as roommates. Life felt perfect, and I was convinced nothing could ever break the bond we shared. University life was loud, busy, and full of new phases. We had to adjust quickly to independence, but since we were together, the transition felt smooth. We shared a small room with two beds squeezed side by side, one small table, and a single wardrobe that could barely hold our clothes. We cooked noodles and rice on a small stove, washed our clothes in a blue basin, and laughed at how adulthood was beginning to taste. Each morning, we rushed across the campus to lectures, balancing books in our arms and laughing at each other's running steps. Afternoons were spent in the library, where she preferred debate topics and case studies, while I immersed myself in business journals and management theories. We attended each other's events faithfully. I clapped at her debate speeches, and she cheered for me whenever I presented at the business club. When exams approached, the nights were long and tense. We studied under the dim light of a shared lamp, scribbling notes and solving past papers. We prayed before bed, asking God for wisdom and strength. When the results came out, we celebrated like children, hugging each other tightly and telling ourselves we were destined for success. We often spoke about the life that awaited us after graduation. She dreamed about working in courtrooms as a powerful lawyer, while I spoke about entering a big company and building a strong career. Every time, we promised to help one another rise. The 4 years passed like a rushing train, noisy but full of promise. On graduation day, we threw our caps in the air, smiling with pride and whispering to each other that our real lives had just begun. After graduation, I applied to several companies, attending interviews and waiting for responses that sometimes took weeks. One afternoon, I received a call that changed my life. A well known company wanted me to join their team. I was overjoyed, and the first person I told was my best friend. She danced around the room with me as we celebrated, and my family beamed with pride. The company building was tall and glassy, filled with people in neat suits walking briskly through the hallways. I was nervous at first, but I worked hard, arriving early and leaving late. I asked questions, volunteered for tasks, and delivered my reports on time. My boss began to trust me with more responsibilities, and soon I was handling assignments that others feared. While settling into my role, I thought of my best friend. I recommended her to the company, speaking of her intelligence and her dedication. After an interview, she was hired into a junior role. Though her position was lower than mine, I was excited we could work under the same roof again. Every lunch break, we sat together in the cafeteria, sharing plates of rice and chicken while gossiping
became
about
busier,
colleagues. And with
After
every
work,
project
we
we
traveled
completed
home
successfully,
together,
discussing our days and planning our
my
futures.
boss promoted
I
me to
felt
a higher
proud
position,
that we were
giving me a
building our
bigger
lives
office and a
step by
better
step,
salary.
I felt
Just as
honored,
we had
but more
dreamed
importantly,
during
I
our
felt
long
grateful
nights
that I could
at the
still share my
hostel.
journey with my best friend. The company offered privileges that came with my role: workshops in different cities, international trips, and access to exclusive events. Each time I traveled abroad, I returned with gifts for her: perfumes, handbags, chocolates, and scarves. I often called her from airports, promising to bring something special back. Sometimes the company gave me 2 tickets to an event, and I always invited her to accompany me. I introduced her to influential people, praising her skills and encouraging others to support her career. We took photos at dinners and award ceremonies, posting them online with captions like "Forever Friends." People admired our bond and left encouraging comments. I believed I was living the dream we had built together, and nothing gave me greater joy than seeing us both grow. Life felt shiny and comfortable, as though every step we had taken from childhood had led us here. I believed we were both moving forward, and I trusted that our friendship was unshakable. My birthday that year fell on a Friday, and my colleagues surprised me with a small celebration in the office. They sang, clapped, and presented me with a cake decorated with bright icing. In the middle of the cheer, my best friend walked in carrying a neatly wrapped box tied with a beautiful ribbon. She smiled warmly and said, "Happy birthday." I hugged her tightly, grateful for her thoughtfulness. That evening, at home, I opened the gift. Inside was a delicate bracelet, golden in color, with small stones shining around it. I slipped it onto my wrist, admiring how it sparkled under the light. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror, touched by her generosity. But only a few days later, I began to feel different. At first, I thought it was stress from work. My head felt heavy, my body weak, and no matter how much I rested, the tiredness did not leave. At the office, I found it hard to concentrate. Words blurred on my computer screen, deadlines slipped by, and mistakes appeared in my reports. Soon, important trips I had been scheduled for were reassigned. Meetings I usually led were given to others. My boss's tone towards me grew distant, and my phone calls from clients slowed. I visited the clinic, went through tests, and received tablets, but nothing improved. At night, I lay awake with a racing heart and cold hands, praying for answers. Life that once felt secure began to unravel before my eyes. One evening, feeling weak, I left the office earlier than usual. The sun was sinking, painting the sky orange as I walked slowly towards the gate. Just outside, an elderly man stood quietly, watching me with sharp, knowing eyes. His clothes were simple, yet his presence was commanding. "My child," he said softly, "you are not well." His words startled me, but I forced a smile and replied that I was fine. He shook his head. "Someone is troubling your life. They want to see you fall." My heart skipped, but I asked him who he was. "I help people," he said calmly. "If you want help, come to my shrine." He gave me directions, describing a small place near the old market. I nodded politely and walked away, though his words echoed in my mind. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the bracelet on my wrist. The room felt unusually cold despite the windows being closed. The next morning, my weakness grew worse, and even my boss noticed I could hardly manage my tasks. By evening, with no strength left, I decided to follow the man's directions. The old market was quiet and smelled of dust and herbs. I found a small shrine, a simple hut with smoke curling from inside. The elderly man was waiting by the door as though he knew I would come. He looked at me and said, "Come in, let us see." Inside the shrine, the air was thick with the smell of burning herbs. Clay pots and calabashes lined the shelves, and a small lamp cast a warm glow over the room. The man offered me a low stool and placed a small mirror on a mat before me. "Look into this mirror," he instructed, "and keep your heart steady." I leaned forward hesitantly. At first, I saw only my own reflection. Then the image began to ripple like water. I saw a hand tying a ribbon around the box, then the familiar shape of a bracelet. Slowly, a face I knew very well appeared. My breath caught in my throat. It was my best friend. My hands trembled, and words failed me. The man nodded solemnly. A
"Do you
few
understand
evenings
now?"
later, my
he
phone
asked.
rang,
I could
and it
only
was
nod.
her. He went
Her
to a
voice
corner,
was
took a clay
shaky,
bowl,
and
and
I could
began
hear
mixing
sobs
herbs with
between
hot
her
water.
words.
She
She
said,
filled a
"I
small
am
bottle
sorry.
and
I
handed
have
it
done
to me.
something wrong,
"Use
something I
this
cannot forgive
faithfully,"
myself
he said.
for." I
Bathe
sat
with it,
quietly,
drink a
letting her
little
speak.
each night,
She admitted
and
she had
pray.
listened to bad
In
advice
time,
and
your
made
health
choices that
and
were
your favor
harmful.
will return.
Her voice was filled with shame as she begged me to forgive her. My heart ached, and though I felt anger, I also remembered our long history together. I told her to come to my house. When she arrived, her eyes were red and swollen, and she dropped to the floor crying. I fetched her water and sat silently, watching her struggle with her emotions. As I looked at her, memories of our childhood rushed back, sharing pencils, walking to school, laughing in the hostel. In that moment, I chose to forgive. I said softly, "I forgive you." She wept even more, this time with relief. We prayed together, and for a while, it seemed peace had returned. Life slowly settled back into routine. I focused on my career again, believing the worst was behind me. I met him at a company event where I had been invited to present a report. He was polite, attentive, and easy to talk to. Afterward, he asked for my number, and the very next day, he called and invited me to lunch. Conversation flowed naturally, and soon our bond deepened. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship grew stronger. He met my family, who welcomed him warmly, and I felt blessed that life was finally giving me balance. I shared my joy with my best friend, who smiled faintly and said she was happy for me. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I received a message from an unknown number. "Your boyfriend has been in an accident. Come quickly to the roundabout near the old station." My heart pounded. Without thinking twice, I rushed out, took a taxi, and headed there. The roundabout was dark and empty, with no cars or police in sight. Suddenly, 3 men emerged from the shadows. 2 moved towards me, but the third stopped abruptly when his eyes met mine. He raised his hand to hold the others back and said, "Wait, I know this woman." He turned to them and continued, "A few years ago, when I was stranded in town with no money and no food, she was the only person who helped me. She gave me money for transport and bought me food, saving me from sleeping on the streets. That small act of kindness stayed with me, and I cannot harm her now." He looked at me seriously and added, "Do you know who sent us? It was your best friend." My chest tightened and I felt dizzy from the weight of his words. Hope pulled me aside and showed me the messages on his phone, clear instructions, exact amounts of money transferred, and the plan written out in detail. I knew then that we could not wait for another day. Together we called the police from his phone. Within minutes, a patrol car arrived, and after explaining everything and showing them the evidence, they agreed to follow us straight to our house. When we reached her home, the officers knocked firmly on the door. She opened, surprised to see me standing with the police and the man she had hired. Her face grew pale when he stepped forward and repeated every detail of her plan: the text, the money, the location, and the timing. She broke down, unable to defend herself. The officers handcuffed her on the spot and led her into their vehicle. As they guided her away, she whispered weakly, "Please forgive me." Tears filled my eyes, but I could not speak. That night, I sat alone in my
Moral of
room,
the story:
reflecting on how
be
close I had
kind,
come to
but
losing everything.
remain wise.
My kindness in the
Value
past had saved my
friendship,
life, but my
but
blind
guard your
trust had
heart.
almost destroyed it.
Trust
I
people,
realized that not
but
every
also
friend
watch
wishes
their
you well,
actions.
and sometimes
Protect
the
your
ones
life,
closest to you
your work,
may be the most
and your
dangerous.
peace. Questions for you: how do you view best friends? Has anything similar ever happened to you? What lessons do you take from this story? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Leave a comment with your thoughts. I would love to hear your views.